Please, sir.
Just one night. Oh my God.
Lake Tahoe, whiteout night, the power flickers. CEO Grant Ellison hears frantic knocks. On his step, Owen, 8, clutching a motel key stamped 317, cradling a feverish baby. Just one night, please. Grant's rules say no. The rattling breath says yes. He can put a promise on paper to keep them together, but at what cost to everything he's built? If he opens the door, whose life changes first? The power hiccuped. Once, twice, then steadied to a low hum as the batteries took the load. Wind clawed at the glass walls of the lake house. The world beyond them had vanished. Lake Tahoe was a sheet of white noise. Grant Ellison stood in the pool of light from the hallway sconces, coat half on, red tie still draped over the back of a chair. He had been tracing a heating loop on a tablet, reviewing a retrofit plan for a school in Reno, counting the ways warmth traveled through good steel and honest pipe. He liked storms. They told you what held. The first knock was timid. The second came quick, almost an apology. The third had the panic of fingers going numb. Grant set the tablet down. His reflection met him in the sliding door as he crossed the foyer. Deep blue eyes. A strong jaw he could not soften even on kind days. Side-swept dark hair with the faint gray that had begun to show up in boardroom photographs. He tapped the exterior camera. The screen turned to snow, wind, and static. He moved to the narrow sidelight beside the cedar door and cupped his hands to block the interior glare. A small shape stood on the stone stoop, bent against the gale. Another shape was in his arms. The porch light burned cold and bright. Snow skittered across the boy's shoulders and stuck to his lashes. Wind had chapped his cheeks raw. In his left hand he gripped a tarnished motel key fob on a steel ring. 317. The numbers were stamped deep, crooked with age. Grant cracked the intercom. "Hey there." The boy flinched, then leaned toward the speaker. His teeth chattered. His breath came in little clouds. "Sir," he said, "just one night, please." Grant's hand stayed on the deadbolt. "Who's with you?" "My brother." The boy adjusted the bundle. The blanket twitched, revealed a round cheek, a tiny knit cap, an open mouth working at air. A wet, rattly sound rose from the bundle and broke. The boy winced like it hurt him too. "He's 6 months." Grant's throat tightened. "How long have you been out in this?" The boy didn't answer the question. His eyes never left the door. The roads closed. The motel shut off the heat. We walked. The lights were on here. He lifted the key fob as if it were proof of something. The stamped numbers flashed. "I can pay when I'm big," he said. "We can sleep on the floor. We won't touch things." "What's your name?" Grant asked. "Owen," the boy said. He bent to press his cheek against the baby's head, as if the skin contact alone could share warmth. "This is Max." Another cough raked the baby. The sound was wrong. Wet air in cold lungs. Grant felt the old instinct to calculate risk and resource. Cameras, locks, the safe routine of solitude. He was a man who wrote procedures. He believed in doing the right thing the right way. He also knew the distance between a room warm enough and a room too cold to live in could be 10 feet of stubborn policy. "Where are your parents, Owen?" Grant asked gently. Wind hissed against stone. Owen swallowed. "It's just us," he said. Grant looked past the boy to the driveway. The SUV sat under a crust of snow, emergency lights blinking a slow heartbeat. Out on the highway, the district plows were probably fighting blind. He imagined the Reno ER, the pediatric wing he had toured last fall when his foundation funded new warmers. He imagined the intake nurse asking names. He imagined forms. He imagined a social worker doing her job with a pen and a checklist that did not know these boys yet. Owen hugged the key fob to his chest. "Please," he said. The word was quiet, almost swallowed by the wind. "Just one night." Grant felt the handle beneath his palm. The door was a heavy slab of cedar. It was also a boundary he had built on purpose. He had rules: security, solitude, schedule. He had a deal call in the morning if the cell towers held. He had a life ordered by heat curves and grid stability, by the math of keeping cities warm. He watched the baby's tiny chest tremble, heard the rattle catch and stall. He thought of his father's hands after winter layoffs, cracked and useless, of his mother making soup stretch one more day, of the old rental where the heater died every February, and a landlord said a blanket was cheaper than a repair. He moved his hand from the deadbolt to the second lock, the one he almost never touched. He did not turn it, not yet. "Owen," Grant said, steady but low. "You're freezing. I hear your brother's breathing. I can help, but I need to do this the right way." He hated how formal that sounded against a child's shiver. "One night is not always safe. I want safe." Owen nodded fast, as if any word from inside was better than the howl behind him. "We'll be quiet," he said. "I'll keep him from crying. I promise." Promises were cheap in his business unless you put them on paper. Still, they were where change began. Grant leaned closer to the glass. "Is that key a reminder?" he asked softly. 317. Owen's fingers tightened like he would lose everything if he let it go. "It's how we get back to safe," he whispered. Grant's breath clouded the glass. He set his jaw. "Just one night, please," Owen said again. Grant stood frozen, the winter wind clawing at his back. Every instinct told him to send them away. Call security, call someone else, keep his world clean. But then he saw the baby's chest rise shallow and rattled. The sound pierced deeper than any boardroom accusation ever had. "Come inside," he said quietly. Owen's grip tightened on the motel key fob, as if stepping over the threshold might erase the last piece of his world. Still, the boy obeyed, stumbling in with Max cradled against his chest. Snowflakes melted into puddles on the slate floor. Grant moved quickly. He pulled thick quilts from the cedar chest by the fire and wrapped both boys. "Sit here," he instructed, guiding Owen to the leather sofa. He adjusted the quilt around Max, tucking it carefully under the baby's chin. Owen's eyes darted everywhere: polished stone, framed photographs, the silent glow of the fireplace, but his jaw stayed set, his hand never leaving the key. Grant crouched down, meeting the boy's wary gaze. "I'm calling a medic. He'll look at your brother, make sure he's stable." "No hospitals," Owen blurted, his voice breaking. "They ask questions. They take kids away." His small frame trembled harder than the storm outside. Grant hesitated. Years of contracts and negotiations taught him to keep control, to never promise what he couldn't deliver, and yet, staring at this boy, wind-burned cheeks, desperate eyes, he found himself nodding. "All right," he said gently. "No hospitals tonight. Just a doctor, I trust. You stay together. That's the rule." For the first time, Owen's eyes flickered with something like relief. Minutes later, Grant had a fire blazing and hot water steaming on the stove. He handed Owen a mug of cocoa, the kind his chef always stocked but he never touched. Owen sniffed it suspiciously before sipping, then pulled it close like a secret. Max whimpered, the sound thin and frightening. Grant placed a call to his private medic, giving clipped but urgent instructions. "Respiratory distress, infant, 6 months. Bring antibiotics, fluids. I'll cover the storm surcharge. Just get here." When he hung up, he caught Owen watching him. The boy spoke barely above a whisper. "Just tonight, right?" Grant's throat tightened. He forced his voice steady. "Just tonight, until the storm passes." He didn't realize then how easily those words would bend, how a single night could open the door to something he thought he'd buried forever. The fire crackled steady now, sending shadows across the wide glass windows where snow still raged. Grant sat in a leather armchair, jacket draped aside, his white shirt sleeves rolled to the elbows. Across from him, Owen perched on the edge of the sofa cushion, his small frame wrapped in quilted fabric that seemed to swallow him whole. Max slept fitfully in the boy's lap, his breaths still uneven, a faint rattle breaking the silence every few minutes. On the coffee table, Grant had set out food: soup, bread, and fruit. It wasn't plated like the catered meals that usually filled his kitchen. It was simple, warm, survival food. He pushed the bowl closer to Owen. "Eat," he said. The boy shook his head. Instead, he tore a piece of bread, dipped it in the soup, and pressed it to Max's lips. With careful fingers, he coaxed the baby to swallow. Only after Max's face relaxed slightly did Owen nibble on what was left. He tucked the remaining crust into his jacket pocket, quick and secretive. Grant noticed. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Why save that? There's more here." Owen's eyes darted up, guarded. "In case he's hungry later." His voice was clipped, rehearsed, like someone who had learned the price of scarcity too early. Grant felt something twist inside him. He remembered his own childhood winters, the way his father would come home after layoffs at the plant, hands raw from searching odd jobs, silence heavy at the dinner table. His mother had cut potatoes thinner in the stew so it seemed to stretch. He had pocketed biscuits himself back then, telling no one. "You don't have to hide food here," Grant said softly. "There will always be enough." Owen didn't answer, just tightened his grip on the motel key fob, the metal pressing white marks into his palm. Grant nodded toward it. "That key. You've been holding it since you walked in." The boy's shoulders stiffened. "It's ours." "I'm not taking it." Grant kept his tone even, calm. "But I'd like to know why it matters." Owen's lips pressed thin. His eyes, red from wind and fear, flicked down to Max. Then back to the key. He didn't speak further, not yet. Trust was a currency he couldn't spend easily. The silence stretched. Snow tapped the windows like fingernails. Grant let it sit, not pressing, letting the boy see that words could wait. After a while, Owen shifted. "You really won't make us leave tonight?" he asked. Grant shook his head. "No. Tonight, you stay, together." Something in Owen's face, tension pulled taut as a wire, slackened just slightly. He still clutched the key fob, but his voice was less sharp when he whispered, "Okay." Grant leaned back, watching them both in the firelight. It wasn't much. But it was the first thread of trust, fragile as glass, drawn across the storm. The warmth of the fire couldn't stop the tremors that shook through the baby's chest. Max whimpered in his sleep, his cough deepening into a rasp that scraped against the silence. Owen jolted upright, panic flashing in his eyes. "What's happening to him?" His voice cracked, the question more plea than demand. Grant was already beside them, one hand steadying the baby, the other checking his forehead. Heat radiated off Max's skin. Too hot. Grant's jaw tightened. "Fever's climbing." Owen's grip on the motel key fob grew fierce, knuckles pale. "Hospitals. They'll ask things. They'll separate us. I can't let that happen." His breaths came quick and shallow, fear making him smaller than his 8 years. Grant crouched until they were eye to eye. His voice dropped to a low, steady calm, the way he spoke to nervous partners before billion-dollar deals. "Listen to me. You stay together. I'll put that in writing tonight. No one takes your brother from you. Not while I'm here." Owen blinked hard, as though weighing the truth in Grant's words. "In writing?" "Yes." Grant nodded once. "On paper, a promise that counts." The boy's lip trembled. "People always say things. Then they don't mean them." Grant didn't flinch. "I don't say what I won't do." For the first time since stepping through the door, Owen's shoulders eased. Not much, but enough to let him whisper, "Okay." He leaned over Max, stroking his damp hair, humming brokenly, trying to calm him. Grant rose, pulling his phone from his pocket. His medic had promised to battle the roads, but time was running thin. He weighed the risks. The snowbound highways, the baby's lungs laboring harder with every breath. His reflection caught in the glass door. Tall frame, sharp suit now rumpled, tie gone. For all his power, he felt strangely helpless. A decision snapped through him. He grabbed his coat from the hook, his voice firm. "We're not waiting anymore. I'm taking you both to the ER in Reno. It's the only safe way." Owen looked up sharply. "You promised." Grant crouched again, laying a hand gently but firmly on the boy's shoulder. "And I keep my promises. You stay together. That doesn't change. Not now. Not ever." Snow howled against the glass as he guided them toward the door. Owen clutched Max close, the motel key fob still locked in his fist. Grant tightened his grip on the handle. This was no longer about rules or solitude. It was about survival. About keeping two brothers together, no matter the storm. The SUV's headlights carved tunnels through the whiteout, but the road vanished just feet ahead, swallowed by the blizzard. Grant leaned forward over the wheel, knuckles pale on the leather grip, every muscle tight with focus. Snow slammed the windshield like fists, wipers beating a desperate rhythm. In the back seat, Owen hugged Max against his chest, wrapped in layers of quilt. The baby's breath rasped louder with each mile, and every sound was a dagger in the quiet. Owen bent his head close, whispering through trembling lips, "It's okay, Max. Just breathe with me, Ty. I got you." Then, softly, he hummed, an off-key tune, thin but steady, like a lifeline against the storm. Grant glanced in the mirror. The sight struck him harder than the gale outside. An 8-year-old boy shielding his brother with his whole body, holding the motel key fob so tight the chain left marks across his palm. The heater roared, trying to fight the cold. Frost still crept along the edges of the glass. The mountain road twisted and narrowed, signs half buried in drifts. Grant's pulse hammered with every turn. He had built smart grid systems to withstand winters like this, spent fortunes to keep homes warm in cities that couldn't afford outages. And yet, here in his own SUV, it all felt personal. 2 small lives depending on him alone. Owen's voice broke through the hiss of the storm. "You really won't let them take him, right?" His eyes were wide, raw with fear. Grant's hands tightened on the wheel. "No one will separate you. Not while I'm here." Owen's gaze lingered in the mirror, measuring the weight of those words, searching for cracks. Then, slowly, he nodded, pressing his cheek to Max's damp hair. A gust shoved the SUV sideways, tires screaming against ice. Grant fought the wheel, jaw locked, breath harsh. For a second, the world tilted. Then the tires caught, the vehicle steadied, and silence returned inside the cabin, except for Max's rattled cough. Grant exhaled, a ragged sound. His voice was low, firm, meant for both boys and himself. "We'll make it. Hold on. Just a little further." The blizzard howled, but inside that SUV, 3 lives were bound together, inching forward through the dark. The automatic doors hissed open, spilling harsh fluorescent light onto the snow-caked entrance. Grant carried Max in his arms now, the baby limp against his chest. Owen trotting close at his side, Yami, clutching the motel key fob like it was oxygen. Warmth blasted them as they entered, but the sterile air smelled of disinfectant and fear. "Infant, 6 months, respiratory distress," Grant barked, voice sharp, controlled. "Exposure in the storm, needs immediate care." A nurse behind the desk looked up, startled by the suited man dripping melted snow across the tile, but her training snapped into gear. "Room 3, now." She pressed a button, and sliding glass opened to the pediatric wing. Dr. Lin Yang appeared almost instantly. Short, calm, the kind of presence that slowed panic without saying much. She took the baby from Grant's arms with practiced care, listening to his chest with a stethoscope. "Temps high. Breathing shallow. This is cold exposure pneumonia, dehydration. Treatable. We'll start fluids and antibiotics immediately." Owen's face crumpled. "He's gonna be okay?" Dr. Yang crouched, eyes level with the boys. "He's sick, but you got him here in time. That matters." A woman in a long coat stepped forward next. Ria Patel, social worker on call. Her clipboard was ready, her tone professional but not unkind. "And who are you to these children, sir?" Grant straightened, adjusting his damp suit jacket. "Grant Ellison. I found them in the storm." Ria's brows lifted slightly at the name, but she didn't react beyond a brisk nod. "Thank you. We'll need some details." She turned to Owen. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your last name?" Owen stiffened, clutching the key fob tighter. "We stay together, that's all." Grant stepped in, voice calm but edged with authority. "He's exhausted. Let's focus on the baby first. I'll answer questions." Ria studied him, measuring, then gave a small nod. "Fine, but there will be follow-up. Tonight, their safety comes first." Grant looked back at Owen, who hovered just outside the glass as the nurses worked over Max. His small hands pressed against the window, eyes locked on his brother. Grant moved beside him, resting a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "You'll stay together. I'll make sure of it." Owen didn't speak, but he didn't pull away either. The automatic doors hissed open, spilling harsh fluorescent light onto the snow-caked entrance. Grant carried Max in his arms now, the baby limp against his chest, Owen trotting close at his side, clutching the motel key fob like it was oxygen. Warmth blasted them as they entered, but the sterile air smelled of disinfectant and fear. "Infant, 6 months, respiratory distress," Grant barked, voice sharp. Controlled. "Exposure in the storm. Needs immediate care." A nurse behind the desk looked up, startled by the suited man dripping melted snow across the tile. But her training snapped into gear. "Room 3, now." She pressed a button, and sliding glass opened to the pediatric wing. Dr. Lin Yang appeared almost instantly. Short, calm, the kind of presence that slowed panic without saying much. She took the baby from Grant's arms with practiced care, listening to his chest with a stethoscope. "Temps high. Breathing shallow. This is cold exposure pneumonia, dehydration. Treatable. We'll start fluids and antibiotics immediately." Owen's face crumpled. "He's going to be okay?" Dr. Yang crouched, eyes level with the boys. "He's sick, but you got him here in time. That matters." A woman in a long coat stepped forward next. Ria Patel, social worker on call. Her clipboard was ready, her tone professional but not unkind. "And who are you to these children, sir?" Grant straightened, adjusting his damp suit jacket. "Grant Ellison. I found them in the storm." Ria's brows lifted slightly at the name, but she didn't react beyond a brisk nod. "Thank you. We'll need some details." She turned to Owen. "Sweetheart, can you tell me your last name?" Owen stiffened, clutching the key fob tighter. "We stay together, that's all." Grant stepped in, voice calm but edged with authority. "He's exhausted. Let's focus on the baby first. I'll answer questions." Ria studied him, measuring, then gave a small nod. "Fine, but there will be follow-up. Tonight, their safety comes first." Grant looked back at Owen, who hovered just outside the glass as the nurses worked over Max. His small hands pressed against the window, eyes locked on his brother. Grant moved beside him, resting a steady hand on the boy's shoulder. "You'll stay together." "I'll make sure of it." Owen didn't speak, but he didn't pull away either. Grant paced the hallway outside the pediatric room, his suit jacket hanging heavy with melted snow. Through the glass, he watched Dr. Yang's team thread an IV into Max's tiny arm, attach monitors, and whisper reassurance the baby couldn't yet understand. Owen stood pressed against the wall, his fingers white around the motel key fob, eyes fixed on his brother like letting go might erase him. Ria Patel approached, clipboard ready. "Mr. Ellison," she began, professional but measured, "I need clarity. You're not a relative, you're not a guardian. You brought them in, which is commendable, but legally—" Grant cut her off gently but firmly. "Legally isn't fast enough. That boy thinks the system will tear them apart. I won't let that happen." Her dark eyes flicked toward Owen. "Children in crisis don't always understand the protections in place." Grant crouched in front of the boy. "Owen," he said quietly, "look at me." The boy lifted wary eyes, cheeks streaked from cold and tears. "I told you no one separates you. I'm putting it in writing right now." "Writing?" Owen's voice cracked, suspicious but hungry for something he could hold. Grant straightened, facing Rhea. "Draw up the forms. Emergency medical consent, temporary caregiver affidavit. Name me responsible for both boys." Her brow arched. "That's unusual." "It's necessary," Grant countered, jaw tight. "You'll list Owen as Max's essential support person. That ensures they stay together under my care." The social worker studied him. She'd seen wealth used as armor, as manipulation, but this man's tone carried a weight she didn't often hear, resolve tied to memory. After a pause, she nodded. "All right, I'll file it tonight." Grant signed swiftly when the paperwork arrived. His name sprawled across the lines with the same precision he'd used to seal billion-dollar contracts. But this signature felt heavier. He handed the pen back, then turned the paper toward Owen. "See this? It says you stay with Max. As long as I'm here, that's law." The boy's small fingers brushed the page, tracing the letters as if testing them for truth. Slowly, he nodded. Later, when the nurses dimmed the lights and Max's breathing steadied under oxygen, Owen curled into the chair beside his brother's crib. The motel key fob lay on the blanket, his hand covering it protectively. Grant stood at the doorway, watching. For the first time in years, he felt a contract that mattered wasn't about power or profit. It was about paper that could keep a family whole. The pediatric ward had gone quiet, the storm outside muffled by thick hospital walls. Machines hummed softly, their lights blinking like tiny guardians beside Max's crib. Owen sat curled in the chair, head nodding with exhaustion but hand never leaving the metal fob stamped 3 on 17. Grant eased into the chair across from him. "Long night," he murmured. Owen blinked awake, clutching the key tighter. His eyes darted to Max, then back to Grant. "You signed the paper," he whispered, almost like testing if it had been real. "I did," Grant said gently. "It means you stay with your brother. No one can break that." The boy studied him, suspicion and hope warring in his gaze. His thumb rubbed circles over the key. Grant tilted his head toward it. "You've held that since the minute you knocked on my door. What's the story behind it?" For a long while, Owen said nothing. His lips trembled, then pressed tight, but Grant didn't push. He leaned back, letting silence settle, showing patience instead of force. Finally, Owen spoke. His voice was thin, breaking in places. "It's the room key, 317. The last winter before Mom got sick. We stayed in that motel. Heat worked. She read us stories until the lights went out. It was the only place we weren't scared." He swallowed hard. "When she died, I kept the key. It's how I know we can find safe again." Grant felt his chest tighten. A child carrying safety in a scrap of brass, clinging to it like a lifeline. He thought of his own father's toolbox, the battered tape measure Grant had kept after layoffs closed the plant. Symbols weren't just objects, they were anchors. Owen's voice dropped to a whisper. "If I lose this, I don't know if I can get us back." Grant leaned forward, steady. "You don't need a key to find safe anymore. You've already brought your brother to it." He nodded toward Max, breathing easier now. "You did that." The boy's eyes shimmered, his jaw quivering as though he wanted to believe. But still, his fingers curled protectively around the fob. Grant didn't press further. Instead, he sat with him in the quiet, letting the storm rage outside while, inside, a fragile story of survival began to unfold. Morning light cut through the storm clouds, gray and sharp across the Reno skyline. Grant sat in a private conference room adjacent to the pediatric ward, laptop open, headset on. His Navy suit was back in place, red tie knotted perfectly, though his eyes betrayed the sleepless night. On screen, 6 faces stared back at him, the board of Ellison Energy. One voice dominated, sharp with tension. Arthur Pike leaned in close to his camera, his suit immaculate, his worry obvious. "Grant, the municipal microgrid contract is on the line. Optics matter. You can't be photographed sheltering strays." Grant's jaw flexed. "Strays?" Arthur cleared his throat. "Children in crisis. The media spins that wrong. The city council panics, the deal freezes. Billions stall in escrow. You know how fragile public perception is." From the corner of the room, Owen sat silently, clutching the motel key fob, watching Grant with wide eyes. He didn't understand every word, but he understood enough. The danger of being unwanted. Grant straightened, shoulders squared. His voice dropped, slow and deliberate. "If our power business isn't about keeping kids warm in the dead of winter, we're in the wrong business." Arthur's face pinched. "That's noble, but the council isn't hiring saints. They're hiring providers who... They're hiring a company that can keep families alive in a blizzard." Grant cut in. His voice rose. Not with anger, but with certainty. "And I'll stand in front of every camera in Nevada and say the same. We're not here to look good. We're here to keep people safe." Silence fell across the call. A few board members shifted uneasily. Arthur rubbed his temples. "You're risking the deal." Grant leaned forward, blue eyes hard as steel. "No, I'm proving why we deserve it." He clicked the call off, the screen going dark. For a moment, the only sound was Max's quiet breathing from the crib behind the glass wall. Grant looked over at Owen. The boy's mouth had parted, surprise softening his guarded expression. "You told them," Owen whispered. "You told them we matter." Grant loosened his tie slightly, exhaustion catching up to him. "Of course I did," he said simply. And, for the first time, Owen's lips tugged into the faintest, uncertain smile. The lake house no longer felt like a fortress of glass and stone. When Grant pulled into the garage, the SUV coated in slush, the boys were no longer guests. They were cargo precious as breath itself. Inside, the fire was already burning, lit by staff who had slipped out before the storm worsened. Grant waved them off, insisting he'd manage. He carried Max to the master suite, where a loaner crib had been delivered by emergency courier. The baby stirred weakly, soothed by the warmth, his fever finally easing under medication. Owen followed close, arms full of supplies, a diaper bag, formula, tiny socks, and the motel key fob dangling from his fist. His eyes roamed the wide space, from tall windows to heavy drapes, taking in every detail with awe and hesitation. Grant knelt beside the crib, adjusting the blankets. "This is your space now," he told Owen. "Yours and your brother's." The boy hesitated, then set the key fob gently on the nightstand just for a moment before snatching it back into his pocket. "He sleeps better when it's near." Grant nodded. "Then keep it close." Later, in the kitchen, he rolled up his sleeves and tried something he hadn't done in years. Cook. Pancake batter dripped clumsily from the ladle, sizzling onto the pan in the lopsided circles. The smell filled the air, mingling with the crackle of the fireplace. Owen hovered at the counter, eyes wide. "You're making those?" Grant flipped one badly. It landed folded in half. He chuckled under his breath. "Don't tell anyone at the office. They think I can only run spreadsheets." Owen grinned, really grinned, for the first time. His teeth showed, small and uneven, his cheeks flushed with something other than cold. He picked up a spatula. "You're supposed to wait before flipping." "Then show me." Grant handed it over. The boy leaned on tiptoes, flipping the pancake cleanly. Pride sparkled in his eyes like light breaking through storm clouds. As Max stirred in the crib down the hall and snow glistened outside the tall windows, Grant watched Owen carefully. The house was no longer silent. It was alive, with laughter, with hope, with the fragile sound of a family taking shape. The snow had thinned into a pale glitter across the lake when Rhea Patel arrived at the Ellison retreat. She stepped into the wide foyer, stamping melted flakes from her boots. clipboard already in hand. Grant met her with a firm handshake, his navy suit crisp again, though his eyes carried the weight of sleepless nights. "Follow-up visit," she said, scanning the space. Her gaze lingered on the crib in the living room, the sticky notes taped neatly along the wall, feeding times, medication doses, even a note in Owen's uneven handwriting. "Sing to Max at 2 a.m. "You've been busy," Rhea remarked. "I like systems," Grant replied. "They keep things stable." Owen padded in from the kitchen, flour dust on his sweatshirt, clutching the motel key fob like always. He stuck close to Max's crib, watching Rhea warily. She crouched low. "Hi, Owen. I'm just here to make sure things are safe. You taking good care of your brother?" The boy nodded stiffly. "Always." Grant crossed his arms. "Tell her what you told me." Owen looked up, eyes steady. "We don't go anywhere separate. Ever." Rhea studied the pair, then flipped a page on her clipboard. "There are complications. After your mother's funeral, records show rent arrears. And there's evidence of a self-help eviction during the storm. Illegal, but it leaves the boys without formal housing." Grant's jaw tightened. "Names?" She slid a thin file across the counter. He scanned it quickly. Dates, signatures, a landlord who had cut corners on maintenance for years. Grant's voice dropped low, cold. "I'll clear the arrears, and I'll see to it this landlord meets code enforcement in court." Rhea raised an eyebrow. "You don't waste time? These boys don't have time to waste?" By evening, his legal team was already drafting filings. An attorney specializing in family law sat at the oak dining table explaining procedures. "We'll petition for temporary custody under supervised support, pediatric nurse check-ins, trauma-informed counseling. It's the cleanest path forward." Grant glanced at Owen, who was tracing circles on the key fob with his thumb, eyes heavy but alert. "Supervised support is fine, as long as it means they stay here, together." The lawyer nodded. "That's what it means." Later that night, with contracts and affidavits spread across the table, Grant paused to watch Owen feed Max a bottle, humming softly. For a moment, the storm outside felt like a different world. Inside, there was order, safety, and a fragile thread of belonging growing stronger with every lawful step. By the next week, reporters had begun circling. Word had slipped of a billionaire CEO spotted at the Reno ER with 2 children in his arms. Headlines speculated, cameras lurked. Grant ignored them all. His focus was narrower, keeping the boys safe and building something lasting. At the Ellison Foundation offices, he stood before his team in shirt sleeves, sleeves rolled high, maps of Nevada winters projected across the wall. "Families freeze every year," he said. "Motel owners shut the heat. Shelters separate kids from siblings. We can change that. Winter safe rooms, partnerships with motels, bundled with vouchers, food, and transport to clinics. Families stay intact." One staffer raised a hand. "And the press, sir?" "They're hungry for a human interest angle." Grant's blue eyes cut sharp. "The children stay anonymous. This is about policy, not spectacle. No names, no faces. We don't need saviors. We need systems that work." The pilot launched within days. Motels signed on, clinics linked transportation. Heat vouchers went live. Quietly, families walked into safety without having to beg for it. Meanwhile, back at the lake house, Owen sat at the table drawing with stubby pencils Grant had brought home. He sketched a square room labeled 3-on-17 in careful block letters. Inside, 2 stick figures huddled together. But this time, there was another figure drawn beside them, tall and broad-shouldered, holding their hands. When Grant passed by, Owen quickly folded the paper, cheeks flushing. The key fob clinked against the table as he tucked the drawing away. "You don't have to hide it," Grant said softly. Owen looked at him, cautious. "It's just easier when things aren't taken." Grant crouched beside him. "No one's taking it. Not the drawing, not the key, not your brother." That night, national news picked up the Winter Safe Room's pilot. Pundits debated his motives, philanthropy or optics. But in the quiet of the lake house, while Max slept soundly for the first time in weeks and Owen guarded the crib with his hand on the motel key fob, the only headline that mattered was written in their steady breaths. They were still together. The courthouse smelled faintly of dust and coffee, its high ceilings echoing with footsteps and whispers. Grant walked through the hall in a navy suit and red tie, Owen close by his side, clutching the motel key fob like it was a shield. Max rested in a carrier strapped securely to Grant's chest, small breaths warm against his shirt. Inside the family courtroom, the judge adjusted her glasses, scanning the file before her. "Mr. Ellison, you are petitioning for continued placement of these children under your care?" "Yes, Your Honor," Grant answered, voice steady. Rhea Patel took the stand, her tone measured but firm. "My evaluation confirms that Mr. Ellison has provided stable housing, medical attention, and emotional support. The boys are bonded. Removing them now would cause harm." The judge turned her gaze to Owen. "Young man, do you feel safe where you are?" Owen swallowed hard, eyes flicking to Grant, then back to the bench. His voice was small but clear. "We stay together," he promised. And he wrote it down. He lifted the key fob briefly, as though to prove it. Grant's chest tightened at the sight. The judge nodded slowly. "Noted." She turned back to the file. "Mr. Ellison, your commitments include medical logs, supervised nurse visits, and counseling appointments. Do you understand these obligations?" "I do," Grant said firmly, "and I intend to honor them." A pause stretched, the kind where futures balance on a breath. Then the gavel came down softly. The court authorizes continued placement of both children with Mr. Ellison. Review scheduled in 6 months, with path to guardianship if conditions are met. Owen let out a shaky exhale, gripping the key fob so tightly it left marks on his palm. He looked up at Grant, relief and wonder mingling in his young face. Grant bent low, whispering, "You did it, Owen. You spoke for both of you." The boy's voice trembled, but his smile was real. "We're still together." Grant nodded, holding Max closer, feeling the weight of responsibility settle in, not as a burden, but as a vow. Sunlight broke across the lake, glittering on new snow like a field of diamonds. The storm had passed, leaving the air sharp and clear, the silence almost sacred. Inside the lake house, warmth radiated from the hearth, the smell of pancakes lingering faintly from breakfast. Owen sat on the rug, Max nestled against his lap, tiny fingers grasping his brother's sleeve. In Owen's hand, the motel key fob rested, its brass surface worn smooth by weeks of clutching. He stared at it for a long time, then rose and walked to where Grant stood by the window. "Here," Owen said softly, placing the key in Grant's open palm. His voice wavered, but his words carried weight. "It was our way back to safe. You can keep it, if we can stay." Grant looked down at the token, the number 317 glinting faintly in the light. His throat tightened. Slowly, he closed Owen's small fingers back around it. "It stays with you," Grant said gently. "Because you carried your brother through the storm, and I stay with you, both of you. That's my promise." Owen blinked fast, lips trembling, then leaned forward into Grant's chest, the first unguarded embrace. Grant's arms wrapped around both brothers, Max's soft weight pressing between them, the boy's uneven breaths syncing with his own. The house, once silent, sterile, a fortress built to keep the world out, now pulsed with life. Crib in the corner, sticky notes on the wall, laughter in the kitchen. Family, imperfect and new, but real. And as the snow glittered outside, Grant knew the truth. Belonging wasn't written in contracts or boardroom deals. It was etched in promises kept, in trust earned, in the small hand still holding the key to a past he could never change, and a future he would fight to protect.